Hey students, Assalamu alaikum. Neeraj Nawaz here. Let's talk about the heart again. In the last video, we covered the circulatory system and the general anatomy of the heart. Now, in this video, we are going to cover the layers of the heart, which include the endocardium, the myocardium, and the epicardium. Then we will go through the conducting system, and after that, we are going to look at the general topography of the heart, which will help you from a clinical perspective. So here we are going to go through all of these starting with the layers of the heart. So here we see a raw picture of the heart without any of its coverings. In real life, the heart is covered by a wet surface called the serous pericardium and then by another layer of dense connective tissue called the fibrous pericardium. We will now start by cutting the heart like this to see all the layers, and then we will take a small segment and zoom in. Now we are able to see all the layers of the heart, which include the endocardium, the myocardium, and the epicardium. These three layers are what is considered a part of the actual heart. The serous and the fibrous pericardium we saw earlier are just coverings, meaning they are not a part of the heart, they are just coverings. We will now go through all of these in little more detail, starting with the endocardium. The endocardium is lined by endothelium just like the blood vessels, and it is the innermost layer of the heart, which means that it is in direct contact with the blood. One thing I want you to know about the endocardium is that it is the innermost layer of the heart. But once it gets to the value, it forms this double layer of endocardium, which I tried to show you here in the bicuspid value. And this double layer of the endocardium are the actual cusps you see in all the values of the heart. That means that the endocardium forms the cusps of the bicuspid value, tricuspid value, pulmonary value, and the aortic value, as well as two other values. What are the cusps of all these values made up of? It is made up of a double layer of endocardium. Cool. Underneath the endocardium, you will find the myocardium. Myocardium consists of mainly muscles or muscle fibers. But you will also find a certain amount of connective tissue here as well. The first thing we need to understand is that the myocardium will form the fibrous rings around the valves. It forms the right and the left fibrous ring around the tricuspid and the mitral valve. And it forms the fibrous ring around the pulmonary and the aortic valve as you see here. Means that above the right and the left fibrous rings, that's where the atria are, and the below the fibrous rings, that's where the ventricles are. And the reason why I am telling you this is because the myocardium is arranged differently in atria and in the ventricles. So let us do the myocardium in the atria first. The myocardium in the atria has two layers. The superficial layer is a circular, and this circular layer is continuous. So the way these muscle fibers are arranged is that they wrap around both atria as you see here, and it kind of unites both atria from the outside, while the inner layers consists of longitudinal muscle fibers. So this one is individual for each atria. The longitudinal muscle fibers from the inner muscles you will see on the inside of the atrial wall called the pectinate muscle. Remember this one? So the longitudinal muscle fibers form this muscle as well. So that's the myocardium in the atria. Now let's do the myocardium in the ventricles. So remember the myocardium of the atria consists of two layers, right? The myocardium in the ventricles consists of three layers. We have the superficial longitudinal muscle layer, we have the deep longitudinal muscle layer, and between those there is a middle circular muscle layer. Let's now schematically go through how these muscle fibers are distributed so that superficial and the deep longitudinal muscle fibers are connected. And they are actually connected like this. So imagine on the left ventricle you have the longitudinal superficial muscle fiber, right? It goes down to the apex of the heart. Then it forms this vortex at the tip of the heart. Then it continues into the right ventricle as the deep muscle fibers. So when I say that the deep and the superficial muscle fibers are connected, this is exactly what I mean. It starts superficially and then forms a vortex at the apex and then goes deep at the other side. So the same thing with the other side. It starts deeply and then goes to the apex of the heart to form a vortex and then continues superficially as the superficial longitudinal fibers. This vortex that they form, this vortex at the apex of the heart is called the vortex cordis. or the vortex of the heart. This middle layer or the circular layer surrounds each ventricle as you see here, and you will notice that the left ventricle is much thicker than the right ventricle, and that is because the left ventricle has to pump the blood to the whole body. So it has to have more muscles in order to provide a more powerful contraction to supply the whole body. And here is a better animated picture of how the muscle fibers go. And really notice how the left ventricle is much thicker than the right ventricle. So now, remember the trabeculae carinae and the papillary muscles inside the ventricles? The inner muscle layer in the ventricles will form these muscles right here. So that is the most of it for the myocardium. The third layer of the heart is called the epicardium. The epicardium is a little special because it's not a part of the heart itself, but since it sits so tightly at the myocardium, it's considered a part of the heart. The epicardium is actually the visceral layer of the serous pericardium, which is the covering of the heart. So, if this is the visceral lamina or the epicardium, and the visceral lamina is connected to the other lamina of the serous pericardium up here, which is called the parietal lamina or the parietal pericardium. So the visceral lamina and the parietal lamina are separated across the whole heart, and they connect at the back of the heart, as you see here, where the great vessels are. So now let's talk about the pericardium in a little more detail. So here we see a raw picture of the heart again, but in real life it has a layer called the serous pericardium, and the serous pericardium consists of two laminas or two plates. We have the visceral lamina of the serous pericardium, which you know is the epicardium closest to the heart, and the parietal lamina of the serous pericardium directed towards the next pericardial layer, which is a dense fibrous pericardium, as you see here, which surrounds the heart and protects it. Basically, the more superficial you get on the pericardium, the more fibrous the layers will be. Now, between the visceral lamina and the parietal lamina of the heart, there is a cavity, and this cavity is called the pericardial cavity, which contains serous fluid. And this serous fluid is the fluid that decreases the friction during the heart's contraction. So, it's really crucial to have this serous fluid around the heart. But in real life, this cavity forms two pouches. So if you turn the heart around like this, the first pouch it forms is the transverse pericardial sinus, which lies between the ascending aorta and the pulmonary artery, as you see here. The second pouch is the oblique pericardial sinus, located in the heart's posterior aspect between the inferior vena cava and the pulmonary veins. That's all for today. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe.